Hello, welcome back to another video presented by Acuity PPM, where today we're going to touch on a topic that most PMOs are not practicing, and that is managing project interdependencies. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to our channel because we're putting out great content that you simply don't want to miss. And with that, let's get started. So the first fundamental question is, what is a project dependency? And from a project perspective, most project managers are familiar with task dependencies. A good project schedule, an integrated schedule, has linked tasks. And these task dependencies could be a finish to start relationship, a start to start relationship. But when we talk about dependencies, this is a very common understanding. We're coming at it from the portfolio perspective, and therefore we want to know what are the project interdependencies. That is, what are the relationships between our projects? And if you're not careful with managing project interdependencies, you could be setting up your PMO for some big delivery risks. Really, this is about risk mitigation and portfolio planning, both of which we've covered in previous videos. It's very helpful to understand what are the different types of dependencies. So we've got four shown here. The first is a technical dependency. The emphasis is that there is some deliverable or key input from one project to another. So there's a technical outcome related to deliverables that affects a project from another project. This could be a piece of software. It could be some equipment. It could be some other deliverable that one project needs in order to complete its own scope of work. A schedule dependency comes into play when there's a timing factor. Now, so the technical dependency, the schedule dependency could be very similar. A key distinction is that there's an actual deliverable that's being shared to another project in order for that second project to complete. That's the technical dependency. Schedule dependency is more of a synchronization. We need to synchronize our deliverables so that we can be successful. So one classic example of a schedule-related dependency would be implementing a new piece of enterprise software and retiring the old system. We can't retire the old system until the new system is in place. These could be two very different projects. One project is focused on implementing the new enterprise system. A second project is focused on retiring the old system, archiving the data, whatever the process may be. Two separate projects, but the timing of each needs to be accounted for. We can't turn off the old system until the new system is required. And we don't need the old system in order to implement the new system, but in order for the two projects to complete, we need to synchronize. Resource dependency is where a project shares a critical resource. And an informational dependency is where the knowledge or information gathered from one project could be of benefit or could impact another project's scope or approach. Common in development, engineering, information technology type projects. This tends to be a lower impact dependency, but there could still be key information that one project team gleans or learns that should be or ought to be shared with another project team for their benefit. And when managing interdependencies, there's some key considerations. We'll touch on these considerations here, talk about our process in a moment. We've talked about in the past what data needs to be captured. Very important. Whether it's with dependencies, it's with resource management, it's with reporting, we want to be deliberate with the amount of data that we capture. capturing more data than we really need is a drain of organizational resources. So just collect what you need. So when managing the dependencies, what project information is needed, what dependency information is needed? Who's going to capture it? This is a people-related question. Is it going to be your project manager? Is it going to be your PMO lead? Is it going to be a portfolio manager? Who facilitates the process? So knowing who is responsible for capturing the data is also very important. Then we have how will this data be captured and when will it be captured? So that's related to our process. And we're going to talk about process in a moment, but how and when will this data be captured? And then finally, where are we going to store it? You'll see some examples where we could store it in a spreadsheet. It could also be stored in our portfolio management software. So these are key considerations for managing project interdependencies. From a process perspective, we've got 5 basic steps. And the first is we want to identify potential dependencies. We can't manage what we can't see. So the first thing that we've got to do is identify, are there dependencies between projects? This can be facilitated in different ways, but it's very valuable to bring the project managers together, help provide the high-level scope of all the projects going on, and allow the project managers as a group to identify the potential dependencies. This approach works well when you're introducing interdependency management in the portfolio. There needs to be a first step to identifying the dependencies. After that, you may incorporate into your work intake or stage gate process a step for identifying potential dependencies with other active projects, or doing some analysis by the PMO or the portfolio team to identify potential dependencies. So that's step 1. Then we want to identify the interdependency types. Is it a technical dependency? Is it a schedule dependency? Is it a resource dependency? Or is it an information dependency? That's step 2. Third step is we need to assess the impact. So not every dependency is going to have the same level of impact. Some dependencies are low level. In other words, it's relatively easy to develop a workaround or a mitigation strategy if the impact is realized, or we're not going to get the deliverable, or the synchronization is not going to happen on time. High level impact is a greater risk to the project. So once the dependencies are identified and the type of dependencies identified, have the project managers talk. Identify the level of impact. And while they're doing that, the fourth step is to get clarity around that dependency and negotiate the details. What do the 2 project managers need to do to work together to manage that dependency? What kind of additional communication is needed? Do they change the scope or add to the risk register or the risk log? Identify and negotiate how the dependency is going to get managed between the project teams. And then the 5th step is build this into the project plan. Now, notice we're not saying that you automatically need to build a task dependency between projects. You might, but we don't necessarily recommend that. And I'll mention a little bit more in a moment. But you certainly would want to capture it as a risk. It could be a portfolio risk potentially, depending on the impact and severity. But build this into the plan, your communication plan, your risk log, etc., your scope plan, so that you can successfully manage the dependency as you would the rest of your project. Now, some people are going to be tempted to create a task dependency, a hard dependency in their multi-project scheduling tool, if that even is feasible with the tools that you've got. This can introduce confusion into the scheduling. If one project delays or has a schedule slide, it could inadvertently affect the other project's schedule and it's less clear. I've seen this happen. It's not usually the best approach, although it can be helpful to visualize the dependencies between the milestones. So if you choose to capture a task dependency between projects, do so carefully and manage it regularly. So now we're going to look at some examples of how to use the data and how to capture it. So in this example, we're looking at a sample interdependency matrix. We've got on the legend on the right-hand side, we've got the 4 different types of dependencies. We have a color coding for high impact, moderate impact, and low impact. Maybe we've got 15 projects in our portfolio. We have the giver projects or the upstream projects that are contributing. There's a contribution being made here. I like that term. Or a receiver, or a dependent project, you're downstream. So we're identifying which projects are the giver projects and which one are the receiver projects. Because some projects will impact other projects more than others. And we'll take a look at that analysis in a moment. But this is a way of quickly visualizing the relationships between the projects, the types of relationships, and the level of impact. So we can see that project number 10 as a giver, it has moderate impact for several, and it's also got high impact for others. Here we see a summary view of the integrations for a specific project. This could be a simple template. The idea here is that we are looking at all the upstream and downstream dependencies for a single project. We could highlight the project title, the project manager's name, key stakeholders. If there's affected IT systems or other affected processes, they could be documented here. Such a summary could be useful for certain projects that have critical dependencies to other projects. This doesn't necessarily need to be done for all the projects that we saw in that matrix, but there could be certain projects that are higher priority and have a number of upstream or downstream impacts. And so this provides a clear indicator of the upstream and downstream or giver-receiver relationships, the type of dependency, and other key information. So this kind of view can be helpful to the portfolio governance team or other key stakeholders to understand the relationships that one project has with other projects in the portfolio. Here we have the interdependency impact assessment. So this takes it one step further. We're not only visualizing the relationships between the projects, we're also taking into account the number of impacts. And as the image shows, we can count the total number of impacts as well as the number of low impact, medium impact, and high impact across the portfolio. This can help with some driver analysis. Which projects are driving the most dependencies or the most high impact dependencies? We could utilize this with priority information. If we have a low priority project that is potentially contributing a number of high impact downstream projects, we may want to consider if we can decouple those dependencies in some form or fashion. If it is and in which case, if there are high priority projects that are being impacted by other projects, then that's another indicator that we may need to add additional resources, provide additional budget, certainly more attention to managing. So this kind of impact analysis can be useful in combination with project priorities to understand the overall impact across the portfolio between the projects. So if we look at this project number 10, it has 8 total dependencies, 5 medium impact, 3 high impact. This project is the biggest overall driver in the portfolio. Project 13 has 14 low impact dependencies, but project number 10 has a higher number of medium and high impact dependencies. So we want to monitor this, we want to manage this. Actually, if project 10 is of moderate priority, we want to protect that project, because if that project goes sideways and gets off track, it could have detrimental impact to other projects in the portfolio. And this is also part of the analysis. Having a matrix like this is helpful so that when we're making decisions on a certain project, let's just say, for example, do we need to put a project on hold? Do we need to cancel a project for whatever reason? What is the impact to other projects in the portfolio? So project 10 has high impact. Project number 7, however, is unfortunately a receiver of several high impacts. So project 7 is a downstream recipient of some high impact dependencies. Again, that team for project number 7 needs to be in close communication with projects 2, 3, and 10 so that they are kept up to date, not caught off guard, and can manage those dependencies appropriately. Otherwise, that project could get into trouble. So if you learned something in this video about project dependencies, click the like button, leave a comment below. If you've got a question, post it, and we promise to answer. Thank you, and have a great day.